Welcome to PLUSone, the series where every month I review the free PlayStation Plus games and help you decide if they're worth downloading and playing. After all, the games may be free, but your time is valuable. May 2019's lineup has been pretty controversial since it was announced, featuring two much smaller indie titles that many PS4 owners don't seem to think are worth trying. Those games are Overcooked, a chaotic couch co-op cooking game, and the short narrative-driven adventure game What Remains of Edith, Finch. After Sony cut down from 6 free games each month to 2 starting back in March, 2 indie titles aren't exactly what most players envisioned, it seems. However, I'm gonna bring some positivity into the mix here because I definitely think that both of these games are worthwhile additions depending on what kind of player you are. So let's dive into these games and find out if either of them are something that you should download. Let's start with Overcooked. Released in 2016, this game throws you and a friend into the Onion Kingdom, where you'll be putting your skills as chefs to the test in order to stop a coming apocalypse. I am not kidding with that one. This game opens up with you fighting off a giant spaghetti monster by feeding him salads. Which doesn't fill him up, of course, because it's a salad, nobody gets full-on salads. And then you're sent back to the ancient year of 1995 to hone your craft so that when the time comes, you're ready to take this beast down. Clearly, this game doesn't take itself seriously, and that makes for some cute dialogue in the occasional cutscene every few levels. In every level, you'll be tasked with correctly preparing as many orders as possible before the time limit runs out. While things may start off simple, like running a restaurant that for some reason only serves onion soup, very quickly Overcooked's chaos makes itself very known. The orders that customers place will progressively expand so that you're eventually serving a combination of several different dishes that require you to juggle your limited space on the stove, counters, and cutting boards. Eventually, you've also got to be on dishwashing duty so that you have enough plates to serve, and make sure that that meat isn't on the stove for too long, but you've also got to chop up some more lettuce for that burger so that you can send it off, but wait, you need to finish washing those dishes, and before you know it, you're throwing lettuce on the floor because your oven's on fire and picking up that dirty lettuce to use it later. Will somebody wash the fucking dishes? As you can see, this game is very stressful, and you're gonna need to be in perfect harmony with your teammate if you want to succeed. You will never be in perfect harmony with your teammate, I promise. For a game with only 3 action buttons, one for chopping and washing dishes, another for picking up items and putting them down, and a dash button, things get incredibly complex within just a few of this game's 30 levels. The kitchens themselves start shifting around to mess with you even more as well, and that's saying a lot when this game starts with some of the least sensical kitchen layouts that you could ever imagine. Who puts each ingredient in opposite corners of the room? From a split kitchen in the middle of pedestrian foot traffic, to pirate ships, to 2 halves of a food truck speeding down a highway, to volcanoes, to space, to frozen lakes, this game is out to make you hate yourself and your friends, and in spite of all that stress, it's incredibly fun. At the end of every level, you'll be graded on a scale of 1 to 3 stars depending on how well you did. The quicker that you send a plate to serve, the higher your tip will be. Conversely, if you take too long, that customer will leave and you'll lose 10 coins off of your final score. The game's level scoring marks probably my biggest complaint with the entire game, which is that I'm never actually satisfied when I finish a level. While I start my 3 to 5 minutes in the kitchen driven and determined to do well, pretty quickly I'm running around the level obstacles and just trying to keep up. Even with a well-oiled team, it feels like you're not doing enough, and each mistake feels bigger than it really is, because then you realize that even though you lost 20 coins to missed orders, you've gotten more than enough money for a perfect 3 stars anyway. All of that momentary in-game stress never has a payoff, it's just a small sigh of relief and a shrug as you and a friend move on to the next stress. I think I'd simply like the victories to be just a little bit more satisfying and rewarding. Unlocking a new character to play with is nice, but it's solely cosmetic, so there's not exactly a good enough reward loop here. Now, I keep mentioning you and a friend, and that's because Overcooked is designed as a co-op game from the ground up. Even if you choose to play alone, you'll still be controlling 2 chefs. Now, you can choose to swap between your 2 chefs at the press of a button, or you can try and control both at once with opposite sides of the controller if you'd like, and you're insane, but neither of these is ideal by any stretch. This is absolutely the kind of game that you should play with somebody else. Whether it's a friend, sibling, significant other, parent, dog, it's just not going to be as much fun by yourself if it's fun at all. That is exactly why I can't recommend this game for everybody. If you've got nobody nearby to play it with, there's no online play to make up for it, and you won't be getting the full experience out of Overcooked. If couch co-op is an option for you though, I 100% recommend that you +1 it to your collection. Even with casual or non-gamers, Overcooked is a blast thanks to how simple it is to pick up and how universal the act of cooking is. If you've got a whole group of friends together, you can even play a team versus mode with up to 4 players. For these reasons, I can genuinely say that Overcooked is one of the best party games out there. And better yet, if you find yourself hooked on Overcooked, the game also has a few DLC packs that add more challenging levels for cooking apocalypse experts, with the holiday-themed Festive Seasoning Pack offered for free on PS4. Lucky for you, I've played the Nintendo Switch release of Overcooked, which includes both DLC packs for free. Actually, the footage you're watching in this video is from that Switch version. I probably should have mentioned that earlier, but it's the exact same game on both systems. Based on my experiences with it, the Last Morsel DLC honestly isn't interesting enough to be worth the $5 that it costs on PSN, so I would just play the Festive Seasoning for free and then move on to Overcooked 2 if you want more from the game. For those of you trophy hunters out there, Overcooked isn't really a trophy kind of game, featuring under a dozen trophies and no platinum to be found. That said, it's not a super hard game to complete depending on your teamwork skills. All in all, Overcooked won't take longer than 6 to 8 hours to beat, and maybe a couple more hours to finish off those pesky 3 stars on whatever levels are giving you trouble. The game's only about a gigabyte in size too, so don't worry too much about having to clear up some hard drive space. Just download it, play it, and have some fun. Next up is What Remains of Edith Finch, an award-winning 2017 first-person adventure game made by Giant Sparrow, the same team behind The Unfinished Swan. You're put into the shoes of Edith Finch, a 17-year-old girl returning to her abandoned old family home hidden in the Washington wilderness. This game is heavily story-focused. Frankly, the game doesn't exist without its story, so I'm going to keep details as sparse as I can so that you can experience it for yourself if you do want to play it. Edith very quickly reveals that she's the last of the Finches, returning to her inherited house to find answers about her fallen family members. As you work your way through the house, Edith will find notes and letters in the sealed bedrooms of Finch's past, which will shift your perspective to that Finch. Every new character that you meet adds to the family tree that Edith is writing in her journal, and leaves the player with a mixture of more questions and more sadness. Often, the game's mechanics will shift to match this new character's personality and story, and this makes every character feel incredibly distinct even though you only get to know them for maybe 5 to 10 minutes. This is also the only semblance of game mechanic that you'll really get here. What Remains of Edith Finch is a story that uses gaming as a medium more than it is a traditional video game in its own right. You'll still move around and interact with objects, of course, but there's a reason that games like this are often pejoratively labeled as walking simulators. That said, this is a really damn good walking simulator if we're gonna call it that. Despite its short runtime of no longer than 2 hours, Edith Finch does an incredibly good job of representing the world that Edith lived in as a child, especially the house itself. While at points it feels almost like a regular house, it's almost always unsettling being inside, not in a horror kind of way, but more of a persistent discomfort. Thousands of pictures adorn the walls of the house, and as you enter the perfectly sealed rooms of other Finches, you're hit with a totally different visual theme that helps you understand what each Finch was like. Having a home so disconnected from room to room, and having that home so packed full of decorations and books and mementos just leaves you a bit on edge. Things get more unsettling as you move further up into the house, as new rooms were built for new children in the Finch family. And as the house expands upward, each room juts out uncomfortably from the building's original design even more. It's an excellent setting for the game, one that enhances the short screen time of every character and helps the house become sort of its own character. As you jump from character to character, you'll also find that the visual style shifts around. One character's story is told to you as an interactive comic book, art style and all, while another one early on morphs the player into different animals as a little kid's imagination goes wild. These yet again help leave lasting impressions of most of the characters, and build onto the game's relatively muted soundtrack. When the music's there, ooh, the music's good, but for the most part it felt like the silence of the house and Edith's words were the only background noise that the game had. Which, of course, works even better for driving home that uncomfortable feeling, so that was most likely intentional too. While I was skeptical at first, I quickly became engrossed in this world and wanted to find answers just as much as Edith does. With the exception of a few slow points, this was an incredibly quick hour and a half to experience, and it left me stunned at several points with just how powerful it was. Now, in spite of how much I enjoyed the story that's told, I do think the storytelling has several weak spots. As you move through points in the house and the forest surrounding it, Edith's narration will appear as text incorporated in some way into the world. Sometimes it's tossed on a blank space on the wall, other times it's written in real time in front of you, and sometimes it's something you must physically unravel yourself, like with a kite in the sky. The text integration into the world gets progressively neater as you become more invested in the story of the Finches. However, there are points where Edith's narration is clearly there to just fill in some dead air, and it's usually when her writing is the weakest and the story feels the most full of itself. For example, within the opening minutes of the story, Edith states that as a kid, she couldn't describe how the house made her feel. But now that she's a 17-year-old who knows big words, she can describe exactly those words. Those words, the ones that she couldn't describe when she was 10? Afraid. She was afraid. I get it, kids can't always describe or phrase their emotions correctly, but that line in particular really took me out of the moment, and there are others like it throughout the story. There are also a few times when Edith's voiceover isn't exactly convincing, or when the somber, more monotone delivery style just falls flat. Thankfully, these moments are usually pretty early on, and as you get invested in the stories of the other Finches, the writing and voice acting fittingly shifts the tone to match. A few of the characters don't get any conclusions, and while that left me wanting more, it's also excellently done so that you can draw your own answers about those characters. If you're somebody looking solely for gameplay, Edith Finch likely isn't for you, I'm sure that's clear by now. Considering that, like Overcooked, it's a very small game in terms of file size, only clocking in at about 5.5 gigs, and considering how short it is, I would suggest at least giving it a try. Treat it like an interactive movie, maybe cook up some popcorn, because if you come into it with the right lens, I don't think you'll be disappointed. If you are a fan of story-driven games, and let's be honest, given the PS4's killer library of narratives, I would hope you are, plus one Edith Finch to your collection because again, I don't think you'll be disappointed one bit. It's not going to be a great game for trophy hunters, of course, since this one has no platinum trophy either, but that's not what the game is about, so I wouldn't expect that. What Remains of Edith Finch is a fantastic and compact adventure that lasts exactly as long as it should. So there we have it, folks. Yes, these may not have been the kind of games that many of us particularly wanted, but for what it's worth, I think both of these are more than worthy additions to the PS Plus lineup, as these are some great little games. Obviously, that word little is the keyword that has people upset here, because these certainly aren't the big budget titles that PS Plus subscribers are used to. Speaking of those prices, if you're watching this video after the games come off of PS Plus, Overcooked will run you $17, and What Remains of Edith Finch will cost you $20. I don't know that I can recommend either for its respective price. I like what Edith Finch does, but it's not the kind of game you'll be replaying, so $10 might be better. And I can't really say that you should buy Overcooked 1 when the sequel is out, is far better than its predecessor, and is only a few dollars more. So yeah, if you're gonna buy one, buy Overcooked 2 instead. Plus, Overcooked 2 has online play, so you can actually use that PS Plus membership for something. Anyway, I digress. Which game are you more satisfied with if you've played them already? Or which are you more excited for if you haven't? Sound off in the comments down below, and while you're down there, don't forget to hit the like button to help spread this video around and help the channel grow, and if you're new here, make sure you subscribe for more videos like this, and much more.